Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking about the gender confidence gap. Balancing building a successful business and being a superstar mom is hard, and yet, in today's digital world, it's more common than ever.
The question becomes, how do we successfully grow a business and children at the same time?
Join us for a candid conversation as we share our insights into marketing and motherhood. I'm Angela Reeder.
And I'm Jessie Valle. Welcome to the Marketing Moms Podcast.
So this sort of popped up in my newsfeed the other day, and it's not new, this gender confidence gap idea. But as a former educator, it's always been really fascinating to me how young that gap starts.
Mm-hmm.
So they've done studies that show as early as age 8, girls start developing that gap in confidence between their male peers. And that's just like my kids are all older than that, but they still seem like little kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems so young for there to start being that gap in confidence. You start seeing where girls will start having lower scores in things like math and science. And it's not because they're not as smart or they don't understand. They're just less confident in their answers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're less likely to admit that they aren't really sure what's going on. It's like we were talking about in the episode where I mentioned the code, where instead of saying, I tried this and it didn't work, can you help me figure out where I made a mistake? They would just erase all of the code and say, I don't understand how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they would rather it look like they didn't do anything than it look like they did something wrong.
Yeah. I actually see this thing right here is really interesting, that a study done at Cornell University found that men overestimate their abilities and performance while women underestimate both, when in fact, their actual performance does not differ in quality or quantity. So I found that really interesting that, so it can begin at that young age and it transfers all the way into adulthood. And men and women are not different in ability. It's
Right.
just that confidence.
Yeah. And
you saying that's, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, you
No,
saying
go
that
ahead.
scares me because my
Yes.
daughter is going to be 8 this year. And I can already start to see when, like, the very few times she has homework that she's just like, I can't do it. I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sits down and she bangs it out and it's perfect. And it's like, if you had just done it instead of complaining.
Yeah. Yes, I see that with my girls sometimes too. And we see this a lot in like corporate, but I
Mm-hmm.
also see it with like women and moms who own businesses.
Yeah.
And I know that this is a conversation that's been had, especially in like the virtual assistant spaces for a really long time, that almost all virtual assistants are women, not because
Mm-hmm.
that women particularly do that job, but because women are more likely to call themselves a virtual assistant
Mm-hmm.
rather than call themselves something else.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've seen that where like even women who, and I don't know how you feel about that, but I know that I certainly called myself a virtual assistant at the beginning, even as my
Yeah.
skills got greater. And even as you go into, say, you and I are techies, so let's say that we learned coding and stuff, we would still say we're a virtual assistant, or even, hey, I'm a virtual tech assistant.
Yep. I did that
Versus
for a while.
I'm a developer.
Yeah.
And that's what the man counterpart would say is I'm a developer, where we're over here saying I'm a virtual tech assistant, and that demands less pay, honestly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think men overall are more confident and more willing to kind of self-advocate,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to things like their jobs and money. And I've read a few studies that talk about how that is part of the gender pay gap, is that women are less likely to negotiate for salary. When they do, they're more likely to ask for a lower salary than their male counterparts.
Yeah. Now, we will also put a little disclaimer that we're talking in generalities, but it is not
Hmm.
all men. It is not all
Not all
women.
women.
Um,
Yeah.
we're just saying in general, the
Hmm.
things that we've seen in studies, the things that we've witnessed in person, seen in articles. So if you do not have a confidence problem as a woman, kudos to you.
Yes.
And if you are a
Congratulations.
man with confidence problems, that's okay. We're here to support you.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, a
That's
lot of
my
these are
30-second
generalities.
disclaimer.
And I think, we do kind of get wrapped up in that where people will say, "Well, I'm fine. I'm confident."
Mhm.
And it's you don't really realize sometimes, I think especially women don't really realize how we feel like we're being confident,
Yeah.
but we don't always come across that way. I was actually just telling Jessie about an extension I used to have for my Gmail. It was really funny. It's called Just Not Sorry, and it will like highlight where you are writing in your emails and it comes across as less confident. So if you write like I'm sorry, it'll flag it. And it'll tell you why it flagged it. And one of the things it flagged for me a lot was the word actually, where it would
Mhm.
say, I actually just did this. And it would say, this kind of conveys that you're surprised that you got it done, right? That's not what I was trying to convey. But when I
Mhm.
read that little kind of note, I was like, oh, it kind of does sound like that. Like,
Mhm.
when I say I actually got it done, it sounds like, ooh, I was kind of worried there for a minute. So I think a lot of times we don't necessarily think about, because we tend to fall into certain speech patterns. And I know the I'm sorry thing
Mhm.
is a big, we've
Oh gosh.
women talk about a lot, like how women say I'm sorry way more often, especially when it's not their fault. Um, so yeah, I think sometimes we can be like, I'm perfectly confident, I'm fine. But if we really look at it, we're kind of doing things subconsciously that are undermining that projection of confidence.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Recently, I was on a call with someone and I recorded the call. And I said, "Hey, I'll get this to you as soon as it's done processing." But in fact, I didn't. I didn't get it to her till the next day. And I said, "Hey, sorry it took so long. Here's the recording." And she's like,
Hmm.
"Why are you sorry? Don't be sorry. Just give me the recording." Women say that too often. And it just like shocked me. And I was just like, "You're right." Like instead of
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, sorry this took so long. Here it is," it's just be like, "Here it is." Like
Yeah.
you don't have to give excuses for why something took as long as it did, or even eh, like you said, sometimes they're just speech patterns. It's not that it's for a reason, it's just that we're used to saying. It's just something we're used to
Right.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And this can play a big role. And I know we've talked about it a little bit in our episodes about boundaries, how
Hmm.
you don't have to over explain yourself when you set a boundary with a client.
Yeah.
Or I think we touched on it last week talking about getting your business vacation ready, telling your clients, I think you caught me. You don't have to tell your clients I'm taking the day off to spend with my kids. You can just say I'm taking the day off.
Yeah. Hmm. I know, because now I'm trying to be more conscious of my word choices. And I I work with a guy who, and see, it's not always a gender thing. I
Right.
work with this guy, and he is perpetually giving excuses for things. Like, I don't care about your excuse. Just get the work done. Oh,
Right.
hey, here you go. Took longer than expected because my kids were sick and da 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 da. Like, I don't care. Just like, here's the work. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't
Which
need to
kind
know
of
your
makes
whole life story.
Right. Which kind of makes me wonder if part of the confidence gap is less an issue of actual confidence and more an issue of women sort of being conditioned to appear less like, I'm confident I can do it, but
Mhm.
I don't feel like I should say, no, I can definitely do that. Like without having some sort of pushback.
Well, here's my holdup is sometimes there are some issues too, because especially when it comes to pay,
Hmm.
whether it's an hourly pay, whether it's a salary, Sometimes I sit there and I'm just like, I know that so and so is charging double what I'm charging. And
Yeah.
yet I'm still like, it's this much. Like I hide the moment I say, it's this much, hide. And it,
Yeah.
because we're afraid of that rejection, right? Even though I
Mhm.
know darn well that I'm worth that much or even more, I still hesitate. Ooh, am I worth that much? Is someone
Right.
actually going to pay me that much for that? Should I have said less? Are they going to think less of me because I charge that much?
Right.
And like all
Yeah.
these doubts run through my head. And again, generally speaking, I can't see my husband doing the same thing.
Right. Yeah. I feel that. And I was reading an article about kind of an informal study that a business professor does, where at the end of every year, she asks her students to list out what salary they think they should be making in 5 years after graduation.
Mhm.
And pretty consistently, men will list salaries at least 20% higher than what women list.
Mhm.
And these are like they've had the same classes, they're graduating all at the same time with the same level of experience, but
Mhm.
consistently she sees those results where men are expecting, I guess,
Yeah.
not just asking. This isn't really an asking for situation, but like
Mhm.
expecting a higher salary. And when you go into it expecting a higher salary, you're more likely to go into those negotiations asking for a higher salary or push back when someone tries to offer you something lower than what you think you should be getting.
I think, and I can't speak for the other side because I've never been in that situation and I'm not a man.
Right.
But I wonder if, like, going into a negotiation, see, for me, if I say I want XYZ, I'm scared that they're going to say, no, you don't get the job. We're going to pick somebody else.
Right.
Is a man not afraid that he will lose the entire opportunity over that?
Yeah, I wonder that sometimes. I don't know if there's any men listening, please say something in our Instagram and let us
Yeah, like,
know.
let us
Because
know. We're
I
curious.
that was definitely an issue I had early on in my business with clients where they were asking me to do something for something I knew was way below what I should be
Mhm.
getting paid for it, but I was so afraid that if I said no, I just wouldn't get anything,
Mhm.
that I went ahead and did it. And I didn't see men in the same space doing that, and I don't know, I wonder maybe they don't have that if they that's just not a thing for them.
Or are they just so confident that they can get that somewhere else? Because
Right.
that's the other thing for me is like, if I lost this opportunity, where am I going to find another one?
Yeah.
When in reality, like, opportunities everywhere.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I think it's interesting that we see this, generally speaking, again,
Mhm.
disclaimer,
Yep.
across the board. Like it's not just in corporate work where, I saw a study that said women will only apply for a promotion if they meet 100% of the requirements,
Yep.
but men will apply if they meet 60%,
Yep.
which just baffles me because I read that and I was like, of course I'm not going to apply if I don't meet all the requirements.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I thought of the
but
same thing, like, of something I saw recently, and I was, like, interested in the position, and then I was like, "Ooh, but I don't like this part of it." And so I didn't
yeah,
apply.
yeah. Yeah, but you would think, especially for like marketing moms
Yeah.
we own our own business, we have
Uh-huh.
stepped out of corporate, we have
Yep.
taken a step that seems to require a genuinely large amount of confidence to say, I can run my own business, I know what
Right.
I'm doing, but we still see that confidence gap
Mhm.
between men and women. And I think that's interesting that it's like an across the board thing and not just like a specific
Industry or
industry or like,
role.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I know that I've seen people have conversations a lot of times about asking for a sale and how
Hmm.
it's, typically men have less of a challenge in just asking for the sale than women.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how many times have we seen, over the years where, we're in Facebook groups and people will talk about like, oh, what's your dream income or whatever. And men have a pretty specific, like, I want to make 6 figures. I want to make $150,000. I want to whatever. But you see a lot of women in there going, I want to make enough to cover gymnastics costs.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make enough to take us on vacation. Like it's less specific
Mm-hmm.
like specific income focused and more like I want to help with this.
Yeah.
That sort of kind of helper role.
I wonder if it's setting ourselves up not for failure, right? When
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
say a number, if I don't
Yeah.
reach that number, I can still maybe squeak by a win because it's like, well, I
Yeah.
did help pay for this versus I didn't hit that 10 grand
Yeah.
I was hoping to, you know?
Yeah.
Huh.
Definitely. I think there's a little bit of a odd way of looking at it too, that like it's not just that women are less confident. It's that because in general, as generalizations go, women are less confident. Women who are more confident and speak confidently and step into these roles are often seen as more aggressive and less enjoyable to work with than
Mm-hmm.
men, because people sort of expect women to be quieter and less confident and less assertive. And so when you aren't that way, it really makes you stand out in a way that can sometimes feel like you're being punished for stepping up. Like, everybody says you
Yeah.
should be more confident, tell women all the time. How many times we were looking stuff up before we recorded this, and Jessie was reading off all of the very alliterative articles about how women should be more confident. And it was like, so we tell women and girls, be more confident, be more confident, be more confident. And then they step out and they do it and they get a really kind of negative reaction in
Yeah.
general. And that makes you not want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to be seen as, a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. You're hard to work with. You're aggressive. You're
Mm-hmm.
abrasive. Like,
Right. At the end of the day, there are some things that you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to be the one to change the entire world.
right.
So there are some things you just have to learn how to work with
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Yeah.
just fighting against it.
And I do think it's worth stepping in and trying to be more confident and
Oh,
being
of course.
conscious of, like we were talking about earlier, of those kind of ways of speaking that
Mm-hmm.
kind of undermine that. Being more conscious of those things and making an effort to be more confident. I think that's definitely a thing you should do. Like,
Right,
don't
right.
get me wrong. But I think you should also remember when you do that, you're likely to get some negative feedback. And it's not necessarily because you've done something wrong. It's just because you're stepping out in a way that's not
What they're used
generally
to.
seen. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
not what they're used to.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to turn the conversation a little bit, curve it around to different ways that women specifically or men can boost their confidence. Like we talked a lot about the confidence gap, but let's talk about some tips that we can do, especially as business owners, to improve that confidence. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
First, you should focus on your strengths, right? So I think a lot of times people focus on your weaknesses and just like harp on yourself about that, but look at your strengths, right? And lean into them. Especially in the online world these days, if you have certain weaknesses, it's really easy to hire, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're just contractors, it doesn't have to be full employees, or you could have a business with lots of employees. You can hire people to fill in the gaps of, I don't want to say your deficiencies, but the things that you're less strong in, your
Yes.
weaknesses. So lean into your strengths because your strengths are not going to be the same as the person next to you. So own what you're good at.
Right. And those strengths can really help differentiate you from other people in your same industry or your same niche,
Mm-hmm.
where there are thousands of developers. And even when I get into like specific platforms, like there are thousands of Shopify developers.
Mhm.
But my strengths and the way I approach developing is what makes me stand out
And
against some of those other people. And so leaning into those strengths and leaning into the things that you're really good at can also help with marketing. It can help you stand out against, the crowd of other people.
yeah, I was going to say leaning into the fact that we're all moms,
Yeah.
right? Because we've told the story a bazillion times about Angela and her crazy kids and how it lost her an opportunity. But you know what? There are other opportunities where moms love working with moms, and it's a strength.
Yes. Yeah. And I love it. It tickles me every time I get an email from a client that's like, I just love seeing your kids bounce around in the background of
Mhm.
Zoom meetings or whatever. Like, because those are my people.
Mhm.
Those are the people that are going to understand that, my kids was up at 4 a.m. this morning,
Mhm.
so I'm a little slow today. Give me a second, you know?
Yeah. Or even Angela and I working together, knowing that we're both moms, we understand
Yeah.
when, yeah, we had to deal with the kid throwing up all night or,
Mm-hmm.
XYZ happened with our kids and we're not upset. Hey, let's push recording another day. Let's push
Yeah.
talking about the podcast another day. Okay, cool. Oh, hey, we had an appointment this morning I forgot about. Cool. Let's meet tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
no big deal. So find your people.
Yes.
Um, I think that should actually, that is one of them on the list to surround yourself with supportive people.
Yeah.
But it's
Yes.
true.
Find your
Like,
people.
what is the point of surrounding yourself with people who don't understand you, who don't get
Mm-hmm.
you? Like Angela said, like, she searches specifically to work with a certain kind of client.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's actually better because finding that niche audience makes you stand out and it
Mm-hmm.
makes you happier as you're doing your job.
Yeah. And I don't only work with moms, but all of the people I work with are cool with me being a mom.
Exactly. Yeah. Mhm. All right. Another one is okay. So I don't know. This one says practicing self care, which I hate the term self
Yeah.
care.
We have issues with that. We'll have to do a
we,
whole episode one day
I mean, we did
on
talk
that.
about unique ways for
Yes.
self care.
Yes, but I think a lot of times, and I know I've said this before, self-care is actually just like normal
Basic
hygiene
hygiene and basic
and
needs.
hydration. Like,
Taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. No, taking care of yourself that way is actually like needed.
that's just kind of bare minimum. Yeah, I think a lot of times self-care is just bare minimum, but we like to pretend we're doing something special for
Ugh,
ourselves.
no. So instead, we want to say, take care of yourself. Instead of practice
Yes.
self care, just let's call it what it is. Take care of your basic needs.
Yeah.
Especially as moms, we put ourselves to the back burner. Um, Work harder at being kinder to yourself. I'm like so guilty of this where I will pull out the fruits and the vegetables and I'll like give them to the kids and then I'll turn around and eat potato chips.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
and
I
like
can't eat the fruit because that's for the kids. No, I need to eat the fruit too.
yes. Yeah. Or like going back to the self-care versus like taking care of yourself, having lunch at the kitchen table instead of at your desk is not self-care, but it
Mhm,
is
mhm.
taking care of yourself.
There you go.
You should
So,
take
yeah,
care of
we should
yourself.
take care of ourselves. And I think that that helps with confidence to like talk about why we're
Mhm.
talking about this. It helps with confidence because it means I deserve this.
Yes.
I'm taking care of myself because I deserve to be taken care of by me.
Yeah.
I deserve to take
Yes.
care of myself. Like
Yeah, and
yesterday
if
morning, oh, sorry, I was just going to say yesterday morning, when my husband was getting my daughter ready for school and getting the kids ready to go, I left and I took a walk outside. I could have stayed and helped with breakfast and getting, the clothes and the brushing of the teeth and all the things to get ready for school. And instead I said, no, that's what you do. I'm
Mhm.
going to go for a walk. Bye. And I took
Yeah.
care of myself.
Yeah, definitely. And I last summer, I can't wait until spring until it's like consistently warm. But
Yeah.
last summer, I would go out in the morning and have a cup of coffee on the back porch.
Hmm.
It wasn't really self care, but it definitely did a lot for my mental health just to
Yeah.
have a minute on the back porch in the sun drinking like, and I was going to drink the coffee anyway. The difference
Right.
is whether I'm doing it hunched over my computer frantically going through emails or
Hmm.
taking a minute and enjoying the sunshine and getting
Yeah.
ready for my day.
Yeah, for sure. All right. The next one is practicing positive self talk. So this one's, it, it depends on what kind of person you are. To be like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying things confidently or using those positive affirmations is not really my personal thing, but I know a lot of
Right.
people who it is their thing. Right. So I have tried sometimes where, like, when I get dressed and I look and I'm just like, you've got this today, girl. And like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be anything big and long. It's just like, you've got this. Be the strong, confident woman you know you are. And like, that's it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't
I'm
have to be
not.
a whole 10-minute monologue.
Yes. The positive affirmations and talking to yourself in the mirror, not my thing. I know people who swear by it
Hmm.
and they are great, wonderful, confident people. So I'm not going to say it doesn't work. But I'm the same way where a lot of times for me, that positive self talk boils down to um, reminding myself, like, I don't have to explain myself to this client, or I can just say no here. Like, I'm allowed to do that because I deserve whatever. That's sort of how my positive self talk comes out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. It's just about not focusing on the negative,
Hmm.
right? And twisting it around to be positive,
Yeah.
or at least focusing on the positive. All right. The next thing would be, mm, how about taking risks?
Yeah. We've talked
Like,
about that a little bit in the past with like our fear of failure episode
mm-hmm,
and things like that, where especially women are hesitant, especially women who own businesses
mm-hmm,
get really hesitant to take risks because, like you said, if I don't get this, where am I going to make that up? If
right.
I don't get this client, where am I getting that money? If I don't do this, what if everything falls apart?
But I think it's also about reframing, because what's a risk to one person may not be a risk to another.
Yeah, that's true. I always really despised when people would go into Facebook groups and be like, ask the question, like, think about what you're afraid of, and then what's the worst possible thing that could happen? And I was like, because like the worst possible that, and women tend to be fall a little bit further into like the worst possible thing is
Mm-hmm.
generally more negative than when you
Yeah.
ask. For a lot of men, it's, oh, I don't get the client, or my income's not as high this month, or whatever. Whereas, especially with moms, it's we can't afford groceries.
Yeah.
Like, and whether or not that's accurate, like I know there was certainly times where that was, accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that's accurate, that does tend to be where women go, is that like it's not just that it's going to fall apart, it's just going to fall all the way apart.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that a little bit in our interviews as well, where we were like, they're like, I'm afraid to jump in and start because what if it all falls apart?
Right. So one of my best friends is getting married this summer. And I was giving her a pep talk the other day because she was worried about this and worried about this and worried about this. And I just like stopped her and I said, listen, the absolute worst thing that could happen is that the groom doesn't show up and you don't get married. That's not going
Yeah.
to happen. He just assured us we don't have to worry about that. So I don't care if your dress gets ripped, your
Hmm.
mom gets into a screaming match with someone, someone knocks over
Right.
something, a fire starts, like, it doesn't matter. Because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you're married, girl.
Mhm.
So it's like focusing on, you know what, through no matter what happens, the goal of the
Yes.
day was to get married, and that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's kind of the same
absolutely.
thing. Like, I have also heard in business, if no one is saying no, then your prices are too low. You have to
Yeah.
hear no occasionally.
Yeah.
And it never fails that, like, one person will say no, or something that you think's the end of the world happens, but then another door opens.
Yeah.
That happened to me so many times where, like, I had a nightmare client, but they were paying me the most, but I finally couldn't take it anymore and I got rid of them. And then an even better opportunity opened up. That
Yep.
happened a few times,
Yeah, that's
especially in the
happened for me a
beginning.
few times too.
Hmm.
And it is when you step up and take that risk that you start to find those opportunities because it makes you look for those opportunities when you
But it's
take
also
those
like a
risks.
confidence thing. Like, I deserve to not be treated that way. So
Yeah.
I'm going to end this relationship with this toxic client
Yeah.
and look for non toxic client relationships.
Yes.
Okay. And then last, just practicing assertiveness, right? So learning to and practicing to communicate your boundaries in a clear and assertive way, but also just
Mhm.
like naming them, figuring them out
Yes.
for yourself. And it'll help you feel more confident and in control.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the things what actually got me off on the tangent this morning with the extension for Gmail.
Hmm.
I was telling Jessie, it wasn't that I necessarily felt like I needed it to be more confident, but even just using it for a week or two really started to pinpoint where um where I lacked that assertiveness or the
Right.
assertive soundingness. Because, like I
Hmm.
said, it wasn't that I meant it the way it came out. It was just the way I was phrasing things because that's what I was used to, how I was used to phrasing them.
Hmm.
So I think it can be helpful, to, like Jessie said, record a Zoom call with a client and kind of go back and listen to yourself and how you come across. Is it how you meant to come across? You know, are you coming across as assertive as you feel? As confident as you feel, or are you maybe using some language that should be updated or removed to get that confidence to come out?
Yeah. And I remember in college, especially in the College of Education, we had to do
Ugh,
that. We had to
yeah.
record ourselves teaching, and then we
Mm-hmm.
literally had to count how many
Ums.
um like, we had to count those.
Yes.
And then we had
Yep.
to practice removing them.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
There
once you become a
were
teacher, you're just like, forget that. I'm gonna say
right.
because that's me. But I also know someone who was just telling me yesterday, actually, that she, again, a woman, wanted to start removing like
Mm-hmm.
from her vocabulary because she felt like she says like a lot. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, I'm like, you do.
Yes.
And that's
One
probably
of
an okay thing.
One of my daughters actually the other day came to me and said that some of the kids had said something to her, some of her friends,
Oh,
girl
really?
friends, had said something to her about using the word so much when she talked. And she does a bit because a lot of times her brain will get going faster than her
Mhm.
mouth and she kind of loses track. So she does use it a bit, but it was interesting to me that she was already starting to be self-confident or of self-conscious
Self-conscious.
of the and that other kids,
Mhm.
other girls her age were starting to call her out on it
Yeah,
even
and
at
I
that young
think that
age.
sometimes it feels like the silence
Mhm.
is uncomfortable, but it's not.
Yes.
And that's the interesting thing that I learned in the College of Education is that the pauses are okay. That you
Yes.
can take that time to think without filling the gap with um uh uh sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that we learned in the college of education, in the college I went to, we had to be very intentional with our words. So there were certain words that we were not allowed to use. We actually got points taken off if we used
Oh.
them. For example, we weren't allowed to say guys, like, you guys, we're going to go do this. It had to be boys and girls, students, things like that. We weren't allowed to say parents. We'd say grown-ups, which I get. I understand. Like, a lot of kids don't have both parents at home. So
Okay, I
saying
get
parents,
that.
saying mom or dad, it
Yeah.
makes sense. But it's interesting when you start to pay attention
Hmm.
how often you say, how hard it is to make the conscious effort not to say certain words.
Yeah.
And just as a kind of funny aside, when Jessie and I first made our book, we were talking it out a lot and we recorded ourselves talking things out so that we could write the book. And when I went back and listened to it and read the transcript, I messaged Jessie and said, I just realized how many times in a sentence I say,
Hmm. Marketingmomsbook.com.
Yes.
Available on
Marketingmomsbook.com.
Amazon. Shameless plug.
And the same thing with our earlier podcast episodes. I think we're both a little better now, though I still catch myself doing it.
Yeah,
There
but I
were
just
a
feel like
lot
the
of,
confidence in how we say things
yes,
is
there were a
better.
lot of ums and uhs and kind of pauses and
Hmm.
where we were not really sure what to do. And like Jessie said, where we didn't want there to be a long pause while we caught up with our thoughts. Like, we
Hmm.
can't just edit that out.
Yeah. I think a lot of different things. One, we're just better podcasters now, hitting almost
Yes.
100 episodes, which, by the way, you
Yay!
guys should be totally excited for episode 100 coming up in a few weeks. But also, we just have that practice. And you know what?
Mhm.
We have confidence in our podcasting abilities and confidence in the fact that there are people listening to us that actually get what we're saying and like our
Mhm.
candid conversations. And we don't have to prove ourselves. If you don't like what you hear, go listen to something
Go
else.
find somewhere else. Yeah.
Go find less, as Elise Myers would
Yes.
say.
As Elise Myers said, if I'm too much, go find less. I love Elise
I
Myers.
know, she's awesome.
So,
So,
for today,
mm,
your homework, start paying attention
mhm.
to how you're presenting yourself. Are you confident? Are you projecting that confidence?
I
Are
should
there
say,
areas where you struggle with that
are you
confidence?
projecting what you want to project?
Yes, that's the biggest thing. Um, are you projecting what you want to project? Because I know a lot of us marketing moms, like I said earlier, we started our own businesses, whether you're, product based, service based, MLM, you started your own business, you put yourself out there. That requires a certain level of confidence. So I don't think it's that we necessarily lack the confidence. I think we're just a little bit conditioned to not present ourselves as confidently as we feel. We want to
And
give
Angela,
ourselves that out.
yeah, you've told the story a bazillion times about how you didn't say you were a business owner.
Oh my goodness. I was just talking with my husband about that the other day because I have a new coffee cup. I will try to remember to post a picture of it. It's very fun. It's an Alice in Wonderland cup. I found it at the store. I loved it. It was expensive. I put it back on the shelf because I have a lot of coffee cups, and my husband is already like, you have too many coffee cups.
Mhm.
But then my husband came back with it, and I was like, oh, don't get that. It's so expensive. And he was like, so? He was like, don't you have a job? And I almost said no. The
What?
word was on the tip of my tongue to say no. I don't have a job.
What do you mean?
And I told him that in the store because I opened my mouth and then I stopped and then I was like, yes, I do. And I said, I almost said no. And he said, of course you did.
Mhm. Mhm. So just yes. You own what you are, right? And now if you are, say, a service provider, I want you to stop saying you are a tech virtual assistant, you're a developer. Instead of saying I have a side hustle, I'm a business owner. I hate side hustles, by the way. Like, I just hate that phrase. And then I hate how people have to go and hustle. I just hate the word hustle.
I don't care for that
Unless
either.
I'm telling my kids, come on, hustle up. No,
Yeah.
I never even say that. It's hurry up.
Yes.
Let's go, let's go.
Quick like a bunny. Come on. Yeah, for sure. I think.
Yeah, stop with just consider how you could take whatever it is that you're doing and put a more confident twist on it and lean into it.
Yeah. And I do want to note before we go, one of the things I had said to Jessie as we were researching for the podcast was an article that talked about how young girls who see women on social media who are confident in their spaces are more likely to score higher with confidence. They're more likely to have more confidence because they have role models. And these are not role models like, they're all CEOs or they're all models. These are everyday women. When they see us on social media, they see us out in person, our kids see us doing things every day, and they see us being confident. That can help them be confident. And Jessie had actually said, sometimes I have a hard time doing these things, but if I look at myself and think I'm being a role model, that makes it a little easier.
Yeah, because I think a lot of things it's like, okay, well, I did XYZ and I thought about posting it, but then I'm like, nobody cares that I did XYZ. I don't want to come across as braggy that that's what I did or whatever.
Right.
But if I put it in a certain way that's a way to be a role model, not just for kids, but a role model to other marketing moms, then I think that can help. Because sometimes I think to myself, like, one of our listeners told me that they, wanted more video from me because I haven't posted a video in a while. And I'm over here just like, oh, I don't know. I don't have anything to say, or I don't think anybody's going to not appreciate, but nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to see this, but they do. They want to see other people, other moms with businesses. And for us anyway, what life is actually like. Like I literally, I rolled out of bed. I've got my bathrobe on. My braid that I was wearing yesterday is like 90% falling apart. I look like crazy lady right now. But you know what? That doesn't mean that the words coming out of my mouth are any less true.
Yes, exactly. This is one of the rare occasions that I actually am dressed this early. Like
Angela
normally I am right there with Jessie.
like
I'm wearing
a
bathrobe and my pajamas. But that's because I had to take one of my kids to the dentist at 7:00 in the morning.
Why did we
because if I hadn't, I would still be here on my third cup of coffee in my bathrobe with my pajamas on, with my hair unbrushed and no makeup on.
Yep. So just, I don't know. Go be
conscious.
Yes, be conscious and be the confident you that you know you are. Own who you are.
Yes. And as we said, in the famous words of Elise Meyer, if you're too much, they can find less.
Thank you for joining us today. We're so honored this is where you chose to spend your time.
If this episode helped you in some way, please share it with another mom who needs to hear it. We're in this together.
And if you're ready for next steps, free goodies, and more, head over to marketingmomspodcast.com.
We'll see you next week.